What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Coordinated Chaos. I am your host, Logan Hill, and today I am speaking to you strictly as a Philadelphia Eagles fan, and I'm going to be telling you the number one thing the Philadelphia Eagles cannot allow to happen on Super Bowl Sunday. The number one thing the Philadelphia Eagles cannot allow to happen in Super Bowl 59 against the Kansas City Chiefs is to die a slow death on defense, especially late in a fourth quarter situation against a guy like Patrick Mahomes, a play caller, and Andy Reid. It is just not advantageous for the Philadelphia Eagles to play that type of defense that we saw. If you're an Eagles fan, if you're just a big fan of the NFL in general, in 2022 in that Super Bowl, what Jonathan Gannon was doing on defense, which I personally think cost the Philadelphia Eagles the Super Bowl in 2022, was just he didn't change up his defensive philosophy whatsoever of what he had done previously, even in the first three quarters of that Super Bowl. He just stuck with the philosophy that essentially got them there, which was just bend and don't break. The problem was within that Super Bowl, the first three quarters, and especially in the fourth quarter, the Kansas City Chiefs were, bending the Eagles' defense, but then also breaking it for touchdowns at the end of the drives as well. And then it came down to the point where obviously the Eagles and the Chiefs were tied at 35. Late in that ball game, obviously, 5 minutes and 15 seconds left. The Kansas City Chiefs get the ball back, and Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid meticulously matriculated down the field, slowly but surely, in order to completely bleed out the rest of that clock. And they just melted the rest of the clock to the point where it only left 8 seconds left for the Eagles to potentially respond at the end of that game after their game-sealing field goal attempt by Harrison Butker, which obviously he made to go up 38-35. And so the biggest thing here is just learn from your mistakes from 2022. Do not go into this game dead set on a defensive philosophy like Jonathan Gannon did. He lived and died by the same philosophy, which is just bend, don't break. In a situation where you have 5 minutes left and you may not get the ball back if you do the same type of defense you did in the first three quarters, even the first 4 quarters and a half, I just think you have to be a guy that can adapt, somebody that is willing to change the way they do defense in order to flip the script on the way that Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid want to, operate their offense at the end of a ball game. So a guy like Vic Fangio, who I think is smarter than Jonathan Gannon, has a little bit more tricks up his sleeve, has a little bit more in his bag than a Jonathan Gannon. I think he's going to have something where if they're in the same type of situation with very little time left, they're going to be a little bit more aggressive. They're going to score really fast, or we're going to get a turnover, if you know what I mean. They're not going to sit back and just let the offense matriculate down the field, kill the rest of the clock. They're going to try to get the ball back in the hands of the Philadelphia Eagles offense and let Jalen Hurts and the run game and the historically great offensive line do their job in order to go back down the field and potentially take a lead again in order to win the Super Bowl. I just think there is just too much of like the hitting your head on the wall stubbornness of the defensive philosophy of a guy like Jonathan Gannon in the last Super Bowl that we had, where they obviously were just playing a little bit too soft in coverage. And we had seen that a couple times this season from Vic Fangio in that defense, which does concern me a little bit when it comes to just situationally some things where it seems like the coverage got a little bit too soft. You think back to the Falcons game in week 2 when Kirk Cousins was able to go right down the field and throw that touchdown to Drake London to take the lead and eventually win that ball game. There's a few situations throughout the season where it didn't hurt us in the long run as a team, but at the end of the day, it just didn't, settle right in the stomach of Philadelphia Eagles fans when it was like, man, I feel like if you just stayed aggressive, you wouldn't have got that, last drive to get a field goal attempt or a touchdown before the half or at the end of a game where you're kind of letting these teams hang around a little bit too much. I think when it comes down to it, especially against a very good quarterback and play caller in Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, I think Vic Fangio is going to be aware enough to know situationally what he's going to have to do in order to win a football game. And at the end of the day, I think he will be more aggressive. And like I said, he's going to send out a defense essentially that will be more willing to go and try to make a turnover happen, get the ball back, or like I said, at least let them score quickly so the offense gets another opportunity to get the ball back and potentially have to go down and score or just bleed the rest of the clock out with, like I said, a historically great offensive line, one of the greatest running back seasons we've ever seen, a rushing quarterback who can bleed a clock for you, and playmakers that if you need a game-winning score, they can make plays to where you can get down there and score in, the red zone or even outside of the red zone. So I think the Eagles are going to have to, like I said, be more adaptive, just kind of curtail to whatever the game is kind of giving you there. And I think Vic Fangio is smart enough to do it. I think the coaching staff learned from their mistakes in 2022, and I think they'll be better for it in Super Bowl 59.